I was left alone when life hit me hard, so how did I become the one everyone now runs toward? I found out that people only care about your vibe when the sun is shining, but the moment the storm hit, I looked around and realized I was standing in a ghost town. At 24, I sat in a hospital waiting room with a life-altering diagnosis and a bank account that was rapidly emptying, watching my best friends stop answering my calls because my reality had become too heavy for their Instagram-perfect lives. Back then, I was the life of the party. My name is Elias, and at 23, I thought I was surrounded by brothers. We had a crew, me, Julian, 25, and Mark, 24. We spent every weekend together, dreaming of being moguls and making it big. But when I got sick and lost my job in the same month, the brotherhood evaporated. Julian suddenly had family emergencies every time I asked for a ride to an appointment. Mark simply stopped texting back after I told him I couldn't afford our usual expensive dinners anymore. I wasn't just dealing with physical pain, I was dealing with the crushing realization that I had spent years investing in people who only valued me as an accessory to their own fun. Have you ever been at your absolute lowest and realized that the people you would have taken a bullet for won't even send you a check-in text? I spent 6 months in a silence so loud it felt like it was ringing in my ears. I lived in a small apartment with nothing but a second-hand couch and the shadow of the man I used to be. Those months were brutal, but they were also the most honest months of my life. When you're left alone, you stop performing. You stop trying to be the guy everyone likes, because there's no one there to like you. You're forced to face the one person you've been avoiding your whole life, yourself. I realized that the reason I was so devastated by their absence was that I had built my entire identity on their approval. I was a house made of cards, and their departure was the wind that finally knocked me down. So, I decided that if I was going to rebuild, I was going to use stone this time. I started small. Since I couldn't do much physically, I poured myself into learning. I studied psychology, finance, and emotional intelligence. I wanted to understand why people leave and why some people stay. I wanted to become the kind of person who didn't need anyone, not out of bitterness, but out of a deep-seated self-sufficiency. I learned that the most valuable thing you can own is your own peace. I stopped looking at my phone. I stopped checking their social media to see them partying without me. I treated my isolation like a monk's retreat. I realized that my friends didn't leave because I was a burden. They left because my struggle forced them to look at their own shallow lives, and they weren't brave enough for that. If you were abandoned when you needed help the most, would you spend your energy trying to get them back, or would you use that energy to become someone they no longer recognize? 2 years passed. I recovered my health through sheer discipline and a lifestyle change that most people would find impossible. I started a small consulting firm from my kitchen table, helping people navigate personal and financial crises. Because I had lived through the worst of it, I had a level of empathy and directness that no textbook could teach. I wasn't the life of the party anymore. I was something much more dangerous. I was grounded. Suddenly, the world started to tilt in my direction. My business didn't just grow, it exploded. People were drawn to my calm. In a world of chaos and fake smiles, I was someone who had walked through the fire and come out cold. I had developed a gravitational pull, because I no longer asked for anything. I just existed as a source of strength. And that's when the ghost started to reappear. It started with a like on an old photo. Then a thinking of you text from Julian. Finally, a phone call from Mark. They were both in trouble. Julian's startup had collapsed, and his girlfriend had left him. Mark was drowning in debt and felt lost in his career. They didn't come to me as friends. They came to me because they heard I was the guy who had the answers. They ran toward me because they were now in the storm I had survived years ago, and they were terrified of being alone in it the way they had left me. I remember sitting across from Julian in a coffee shop. He was 30 now, looking older and more frantic. He talked for an hour about his problems, never once acknowledging the 2 years of silence when I was the one hurting. He looked at me with this desperate hope, waiting for me to fix his life. What would you do? Would you help the person who abandoned you, or would you let them feel the weight of their own choices? I looked at Julian, and I didn't feel the anger I thought I would. I didn't feel the need to shout at him about the hospital visits I did alone or the nights I couldn't afford heat. I realized that he was still the same person, fragile, dependent on others, and terrified of the dark. I had become the person everyone runs toward not because I am rich or successful, but because I am the only one who isn't running away from myself. I helped him, not by giving him money or by being his best friend, again, but by giving him the truth. I told him that the reason he was failing was that he was looking for a rescue instead of a transformation. I showed him the door, but I told him he had to walk through it alone. The value of my journey wasn't in the success, it was in the solitude. I learned that you cannot truly be there for others until you have learned how to be entirely alone. The value of my journey wasn't in the success, it was in the solitude. I learned that you cannot truly be there for others until you have learned how to be entirely alone. The people who abandoned me gave me the greatest gift possible. They forced me to find the hero inside me so I never had to look for one outside again. Now, my life is full of people. But the difference is that I am the anchor, not the ship. I don't need them to stay, and that is exactly why they never want to leave. I became the person everyone runs toward because I stopped running away from the man I saw in the mirror. Do you think it's possible to truly forgive someone who leaves you when you're down, or does that trust stay broken forever? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you ever been left alone during a crisis only to come back stronger than ever? Let's talk about it in the comments. If this story reminded you that your current isolation might just be your preparation, please like, share, and subscribe to our community. You are never as alone as you think you are, you're just in the middle of your own reconstruction.